Hello and welcome to another jungle video, and in this one we should be taking a look at the first blood strategies that you can use to get that first kill in every game you play. Now obviously there are conditions to all of these situations, that makes it a first blood, but the goal is to do some of these depending on your champion, who you're against, and make sure you can get a good early lead for your team, for yourself, and therefore be in a better position to carry, win, and climb. Obviously there are very heavy cheese strategies that you can use: wraparounds, blitzcrank hooks, thresh hooks, top laners and bottom laners setting traps in the tri-bushes, and we will hint to those when they're relevant, but overall we are focused from a jungle perspective how best to get a kill as fast as possible. So if you love tilting the enemy from the first minute, make sure you consider liking and subscribing if you enjoy and learn something from this video, and also head to the Patreon to support the content further. And now without hesitation, let's begin. Now obviously first blood means to get the first kill in a game, that extra gold for yourself, as well as setting the enemy jungle behind such that you can track them better, invade them better, and remove them from the game, and basically exert your will on the entire map. Because if you don't do that and the enemy jungle ganks first or gets the first blood, you know what your laners are gonna say. You know what they're gonna say, right? They're gonna wear the t-shirt and make a sign that says jungle difference, and you're gonna respond with mid gap, and everyone's upset and tilted and you lose. So why be in that situation when you can just get the first kill? And the first way to do that is with a late buff invade. If you're on the red side of the map, you can perhaps do this with your whole team minus the top laner. Try and wait for them to start the red buff. You wait until 1 minute 25, you head into the jungle, you look to grab that first kill as well as a buff. Now obviously it's really good when you have things like a hooker. And no, that's not what I meant, you dirty heathens. I mean the thresh, the blitzcrank, the pike, even a Braum for the CC stacking. What is the enemy jungler hoping to achieve? What is the damage profile of your team versus their team? This obviously helps if you can place a ward on the top side, head back to base, get yourself a red scanner, and make sure you're approaching without being seen. There's also a prominent way of doing this just with your top laner by rotating around the top side of the red buff if you know the enemy jungler is going to be starting there, and you don't always have to make this a super late invade. You can even do it just as the red buff spawns, time it appropriately, and make sure you get that kill, and at the very least you get a flash, but ideally here we want that first blood. And in that situation you have to consider the power that you and your top laner have as a 2v2 versus the enemy jungler in top, as well as the fact that the enemy mid and your mid will have to rotate appropriately if the fight actually extends that long. This is very much done with junglers that can battle at level 1 very well. Things like a Rengar or a Grave specifically come to mind. You also have to think about the range versus melee component. If you don't have the CC and you don't have the damage profile, and you can get kited out, well suddenly the aggro of the red buff and who tanks it becomes an issue. And like in this weird invade that I'm showing you with the Nocturne against the Zyra, yeah of course I'm the Zyra, I just walk in and out, and as soon as my Q pops up out of the ground, remember there's a cast delay, I combine it with the smite and I go on my merry way. What spells you can actually use with the smite is something you have to think about, and yes the Nocturne was looking to grab himself some hot tea, but instead of getting that red buff, getting that first blood, he loses the buff, has to retreat back to his blue. Now the Zyra jungle is ahead in farm cadence and lane pressure, and he also didn't even get the 400 gold bonus. So the downside to failure is big. At the same time, if you don't have the CC or damage and you don't play it correctly, you end up in a bit of a wishy-washy fiesta, weird kind of Korean thing, except you have none of the skills. So in that case, why do all this weird stuff that depends on your team when you can simply red buff level 2 gank? And oh, this is one as old as time, and lane is still never expected. The only time they expect it now is basically if there's a twitch. Because it is simply very telegraphed and everyone knows, hey, he's gonna go red buff and then to whichever lane is most easily gankable. However, there's still ways for you to make it unique and very interesting. Firstly, please consider where the enemy jungler started. You don't want to be on the same side where you can be collapsed on. Maybe you burn sums and get low, and now basically your position is telegraphed. You don't want the enemy jungler to be right there to either shove you out of your jungle, steal your camps, deny you scuttle crabs. Basically, the trade-off for the level 2 gank isn't actually worth the first blood. Secondly, you also have to pay attention to wards. In the Sylas case, it's very common for Sylas to do level 2 ganks. You have a great way to hop over walls with your E, time it, scan it. I made an entire video about this earlier in the year. But if you know the enemy mid placed the ward on the top side where you're going to be coming from because, they're big brain and they're thinking about it, then don't be afraid to simply take a long route, get the regeneration talisman passive, walk all the way around, and get your first blood anyway. With heavy early level 2 junglers like the Xin, the Camille, the Jarvan, the Sylas, the Twitch, this is what we're looking to do, and we have to pay attention to these small details so that you really have the best chance to actually get that first blood. Now, if you don't get the first blood and you simply get a flash, go to the top lane, try again, get a flash. Obviously we want the first blood, that's what this video is about, but don't let the fact that you don't get the kills deter you or stop you from having that pressure. You might not get the first kill, but you definitely have sums, and now you're living rent-free right in their brains, and you can get a whole bunch more than just one kill. As we've been saying on this channel for years, repeat and abuse. Now obviously when you're talking about that level 2 gank for Twitch for example, you can either go to the mid lane, you can go to the bottom lane, or you can simply go all the way to the top lane. You have a lot of options, but you can also combine it and basically take unique pathings. Yes, we love to use that red buff into a level 2, but don't let it be the only way you do things, especially if you want to late invade first. In this case, Twitch's team walks into the enemy jungle. They don't exactly have the best invade comp, but they're all there. Everyone's working on the same page. And yeah, I know that doesn't happen a lot in solo queue, but even though they're unable to actually get the red buff, even though they're unable to get away with that first kill, you fall back, you take your blue, there's nothing stopping you from going bottom lane again if you burned any sums. Even if you didn't, they won't expect a level 2 blue into bottom lane gank. The best way to do this is of course with the surprise factor, and unique pathings always get that element. Now if all this lane pressure is kind of unsettling to you, you don't exactly trust your teammates, maybe you can actually farm the jungle and do a lot of different things, unlike things like Silas and Twitch, well then what have Jarvan, Camille, Kindred, Graves, Shaco, Lee Sin all been doing for many years? A counter buff invade. Now the idea here is if the enemy jungler say starts in the blue and wants to go into Gromp, you can easily do your red, invade their jungle, and kill them. Pay attention to lane prio, yes, because obviously if the enemy bot rotates and it's a drawn out fight, you don't want to be collapsed and become the first meal yourself. That's just embarrassing. If the enemy jungler starts on the opposite side, then of course you also have the option of basically invading, taking their buffs, maybe another camp, and then setting a trap in a bush as soon as they show up. Thank you very much, first blood. However, this strategy is very heavily focused on getting pressure by denying them when they don't know what you're doing. That scanner always very useful to do so. It's also really great against other junglers that also like to do a buff Gromp clear. But you must have a strong level 2. If you cannot make this work, you might be on your own, you don't have teammates to back you up like in a late invade. And the downside to this not working can be cataclysmic. And if you're Jarvan, it can be literally so. Now what we touched on there was talking about timing the enemy jungler route, knowing where they began, what they want to accomplish, and then abusing it by getting a level 2 in our advantage. So if a late wall hop blue invade isn't exactly on the docket for you, and you prefer to get level 3 before you get up to any shenanigans, then simply you need to use a jungle timing route. In the case of Volibear, I will do this all the time and make sure I start on the same side as the enemy jungler, which means it can be very useful to get a deep ward on one of their buffs early so that you know exactly what you want to do in order to meet them at one of their camps. If you know that they didn't start red and they started blue, then you can also start red, move on up to do your blue and Gromp, get level 3, but because you clear the jungle faster, especially as Volibear, you can move on up to their red buff and secure a first kill. If you're on the other side of the map and you're against a Shyvana or an Evelynn, you know you can do the exact same thing. Do your blue, do your Gromp, do your red, move on into their jungle. If they're doing a full clear, as you know, hop on over, kill them at wolves. If it's an Evelynn, set a trap in the blue bush. You don't even need to hit your E because basically they won't expect it. You chase them down, first blood for you, and off you go. This is part of the mind games of jungling and why those early wards provide such value. Things like Karthus are very easy. He starts on blue, Gromp, wolves, Raptors, red Krugs. You know 255, if you meet him at Krugs, you can try and defeat him and push him off. Obviously, this is predicated on your laners behaving themselves and not actually killing each other 2v2, 1v1 and then blaming you. But hopefully I basically don't need to read a whole bunch of comments about how you do this and don't get first blood because your bot's 0-12. That's not the case and not the point. However, finally, in a more conservative nature, simply put, get first blood by being a fast level 3 ganking jungler. Everyone knows an Elise can do buff Gromp and be top lane at 2 minutes 30. Free kill for her, top laners never expect it, they don't ward appropriately, and it's always before the enemy jungler is there because they simply cannot clear as fast. Alternatively, if you're Rek'Sai, you can of course do the red Krugs Raptors, loop on down to the bottom lane, get the sums, get the kills, and now you can basically camp the lane, have total dragon prio, and the game is won. Obviously, that's predicated on you using the lead to preempt the enemy jungler's location and tracking, shut them down, don't let them get away with AFK farming, but that's more general jungling, which is in, every other video. And basically, most junglers are actually meant to do this, get level 3, look for a gank. The ones that do it faster, the Elises, the Taliyahs, the Volibears, Lee Sins, Rek'Sais, Jarvans. Almost every jungler can get level 3 and look to gank. So if you don't have the late invade or team comp to actually do something like that, if you don't have the jungling prowess to late invade at level 1, maybe you don't have a wall dash to make it easy to basically level 2 blue buff steal, maybe you don't want to perma invade because you don't have the 1v1 power, you will always have a chance at first blood if you make sure you work into your game plan an early level 3 gank and which lanes provide you the best CC and damage to actually get away with it. And finally, if you find yourself in a 3-4 camp clear, the enemy jungler hasn't ganked yet, no lane has died, and you end up in a 1v1 around the scuttle crab, as long as you win 1v1, that's your first blood. Obviously, in this case, you're basically coin flipping which laner rotates first, understanding which lane has prio, But I'm sure most of you would have seen examples like this. Evelyn sees Nidalee gank on the bottom side, Nidalee and Evelyn engage in the river, Evelyn has the 1v1 heads up, but unfortunately the Talon wasn't paying attention to that and the Zed, who was recalling with no HP, makes the first move and Nidalee gets the first kill. And yes, I'm tilted just by looking at this replay. But there you have it, a few ways for you to look to get first blood every single game, assess your team comp as well as your jungle matchup to decide which is best for you. Also use it to basically adapt and evolve your early game plans, give you something more to think about other than just clear and gank. And always remember the mental aspect of this, getting first blood for you and your team. Remember how amazing it feels. Now I want to keep this monetized, but there are certain levels of good feels that you can get from a first blood that aren't really achievable in real life, especially when you're 2-2 in promos or something like that. And on the other side, remember the demoralization you can inflict upon the enemy when you take away that first blood, you take away their buff, and then you translate that to 15 minutes of raw punishment with no safe word for the enemy jungler as you end up 4 to 5 levels above him. Thank you very much for watching this video, a little bit shorter, more general in nature, but something all junglers need to think about for their early game plans. Please do like, share, and comment if you enjoyed and learned something. Don't forget to subscribe for all the videos coming very soon, and head to the Patreon to support all the content further. Don't forget I have a secondary coaching channel as well as a Twitch stream that I kinda use every now and then. Thank you for watching, and as always I will see you all in the next tutorial.